She collapsed on divorce day, but at the hospital, the millionaire called her my wife. Her ex broke. That morning, a cold December morning, in the small kitchen of her apartment in Eugene, Oregon, the fog still hugged the windows, and the chill crept in from outside as Emma prepared a special breakfast. She had planned it the night before: fresh waffles, hand-squeezed orange juice, and his favorite French press coffee. It was their 3-month wedding anniversary. Emma never forgot that number. 3 months. To some, it might seem insignificant, a mere blink in a long marriage. But to her, it symbolized a beginning, a shared life, a promise of something lasting. That morning, everything was wrapped in soft routine: light jazz in the background, the rich aroma of coffee in the air, and a dish towel she was folding carefully at the table. Tyler hadn't come out of the bedroom yet. He was usually out for his morning run by now. Strange. Emma walked out of the kitchen and found him in the living room, hunched over on the couch, hands clenched between his knees, eyes fixed on the hardwood floor, as if trying to decode a hidden message in its scratches. She smiled, still holding the dish towel. "Hey, babe, you okay?" Tyler looked up, and Emma knew. She didn't need to hear a word. There was something in his eyes, not anger, not cruelty, but a hollow emptiness, the kind of look that says goodbye before words can. "Emma, we need to talk." That sentence was a blade, not because it was unexpected, but because it was painfully familiar. No one says, "We need to talk," to share good news. And she knew. This was the end. Tyler spoke quickly, like tearing off a bandage. "I can't do this anymore. There's someone else. I know it sounds crazy, but I've fallen for her." Emma froze. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't cry. The towel slipped from her hands, and suddenly the coffee smelled acidic. 3 months. Are you serious? I didn't plan this. It just happened. I didn't want to lie to you. I thought being honest was the least I could do." "Honest?" The word came out like venom. He spoke about falling for another woman, as if he were changing his route to work. Emma's body stood still, but her mind tried to flee, escape this cruel reality. "So everything we had, the vows, the wedding, what was it? Just rehearsal?" "Please, Emma." Tyler's voice cracked, nearly pleading, but she wasn't listening anymore. She didn't cry. Not yet. She turned, walked to their bedroom, and packed 2 suitcases with surgical calm. She slipped off her wedding ring and placed it on the dresser. In the mirror, Emma saw someone she didn't recognize. A woman with vacant eyes, pale skin, and a loneliness that couldn't be named. Moving back to her mother's house felt like rewinding the tape of her life. The old house, the familiar smell of banana bread baking in the oven, the scratchy blanket in her childhood room. It all seemed to mock her. "You didn't get very far, did you?" Emma was no longer the romantic dreamer, but that morning, sitting by the window with a mug of tea in hand, she still tried to understand how someone who claimed to love her could turn away so easily. What she didn't know was that a whole new life was waiting just around the corner. The days after leaving the apartment she once shared with Tyler passed in a haze. Emma drifted like a shadow in her old bedroom at her mother's house, where everything smelled like the past, from the faded floral pillowcases to the creaking wooden closet door. She spent most of her time lying still, listening to the wind whistle through the windows, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Tyler's words echoed like a voice message on loop. "I've fallen in love with someone else." Yeah, but soon her body started to speak louder than her thoughts. A strange morning nausea, a persistent fatigue without reason, and subtle shifts in her rhythm made Emma take notice. At first, she blamed the stress, but when the nausea returned each morning like an unwanted alarm clock, she knew something was different. On a quiet Saturday afternoon, while her mother went grocery shopping, Emma walked to the corner pharmacy. She tucked the pregnancy test into her coat pocket like she was carrying the world's greatest secret. 3 minutes. It felt like the longest stretch of time in her life. 2 lines. Emma sank onto the edge of the bathtub, gripping the tiny stick. Her tears didn't fall, not out of strength, but because her body hadn't yet decided how to feel. In that moment, she felt like she'd both been pushed off a cliff and handed a spark of something new. A second heartbeat, not her own, was beginning to grow in silence. Emma didn't tell anyone, not out of shame, but because speaking it aloud would make it too real. She needed time to process, to understand, to breathe. She knew telling Tyler wouldn't change anything. He wasn't coming back. And even if he did, she didn't want him to. Each morning she woke with fear. How will I raise a child alone? But that fear was quickly overtaken by something else, an unformed, quiet resolve. I'll try. Emma began updating her resume. She applied to anything that matched her skill set: administrative roles, project assistants, office coordinators, any job that paid and didn't ask too many questions. She cut back on everything: chamomile tea instead of coffee, toast instead of lunch. But one thing she didn't give up was hope, the fragile belief that somewhere out there, a chance still waited. One night, while reviewing her resume over a cup of lukewarm tea, an email popped up. Interview invitation, Whitmore Architecture and Design. Emma blinked. She couldn't even remember if she had applied to that company. It must have been one of dozens she submitted in a blur. The name sounded upscale. The salary wasn't bad. The office was in downtown Portland, about a 40-minute drive from her mom's place. She didn't overthink it. She clicked confirm like a drowning woman reaching for a lifeline. The night before the interview, she chose her most professional navy dress, ironed it carefully, prepared her documents, and went to bed early. Still, she barely slept. The next morning, she threw up right after brushing her teeth. But this time, instead of panicking, Emma looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "I'm not giving up, not this time." The building of Whitmore Architecture and Design towered over Emma like a sleek glass sculpture in the heart of Portland. Everything about it exuded professionalism: polished marble floors, manicured indoor plants, and people walking with purposeful strides, Bluetooth earpieces in place. Emma felt small in this world. Wearing a pressed second-hand navy dress and worn-out flats, she stepped into the unfamiliar space with palms damp from nerves. A receptionist led her into a quiet meeting room. Just a long table, soft yellow lighting, and a frosted glass door. No one said who would interview her. No extra papers. Just the resume she had printed at home. When the door opened, Emma sprang to her feet. A tall man in a rolled-up gray shirt entered, carrying a sleek tablet. His gaze was sharp, with no softness to spare. "Emma Carter?" he asked, voice flat and clipped. "Yes, that's me," she replied, forcing a polite smile. "Let's be direct. I don't have much time," he said, sitting across from her without making eye contact. Emma nodded, straightening her posture. "What's your experience managing project timelines and handling client requests?" She answered clearly, without hesitation. She spoke of her time at a small interior design firm that had shut down during COVID, how she handled schedules, negotiated with vendors, and adapted plans without compromising quality. The man, still unnamed, nodded occasionally but asked few questions. Instead, he studied her, eyes working like they were solving an equation drawn across her expression. "Why did you leave your last company?" he asked. "They went under after the pandemic. I've been freelancing since," Emma replied firmly. For the first time, his eyes met hers. Not kindly, more like an appraisal, as if he was measuring the worth of a slightly chipped but valuable item. "You start Monday. Project department, 8 a.m. sharp." Emma blinked. I'm hired?" "Yes, I need someone immediately. And you seem capable. But let me be clear, I have zero patience for excuses." He stood, nodded briskly in place of a farewell, and walked out. Emma remained seated, stunned. She had just been hired at one of the top architecture firms in the city by a man who hadn't even asked, "Do you have any questions?" No compliments, no smiles, just a clear decision, like he'd already seen all he needed. Emma quickly realized that at Whitmore Architecture and Design, no one had time to walk her through things step by step. Everything functioned like a precise machine, and if you couldn't keep up, you were left behind. No explanations, no apologies. Monday morning, Emma arrived at 7:45. A junior analyst named Liam showed her around the workspace. Open concept, glass panels, steel fixtures, and giant drafting tables. Her desk was spacious, her computer state-of-the-art, everything organized. The other employees greeted her with polite but distant nods. There was a coldness in the air, but she wasn't intimidated. Daniel Whitmore, she knew his name now, walked past twice that morning without stopping. But both times she felt his gaze linger on her for just a second. Emma worked nonstop. She learned the internal systems, read through project briefs, responded to emails. By the end of her first week, her body ached. But inside, there was a quiet feeling she hadn't felt in months. Pride, pregnant, alone. And somehow, Emma was doing what she once thought impossible, starting over. That first week, she took notes like her life depended on it. Project names, codes, clients, deadlines, internal tools. Everything was new. Everything was urgent. She had to learn the company's internal project software, which was nothing like what she'd used before. Technical drawings were categorized by floor, by tag, by client approval stage. Every mistake, no matter how small, could delay millions in construction. No one had time to clean up someone else's mess. Emma didn't ask many questions, but she watched closely. She knew she was new. And more than that, she was an outsider. She worked quietly, ate lunch at her desk, kept her headphones in to drown out the sound of her own stomach, and stayed composed through waves of nausea. No one knew she was pregnant, and she wasn't ready to let them know. Daniel didn't say much to her, but every time he passed her desk, Emma could feel he knew exactly what she was working on, how far along she was, and whether she was falling behind. His presence was like cold air, subtle, but impossible to ignore. Once she received a report back from another department, her file had been forwarded with a single line. Formatting is off. Redo. No name attached, but she knew it came from Daniel. There were no compliments, no thank yous. But Emma didn't feel hurt. She understood. At this place, competence wasn't rewarded with words. It was rewarded with silent trust, and she was determined to earn that. At night, she still felt exhausted and nauseous. But instead of collapsing, she reopened documents, reviewed internal workflows, and taught herself how everything fit together. Some nights, she sat staring at the screen, eyes burning, heart racing from pressure and fatigue. But each morning she rose early, tied her hair neatly, dabbed a little blush on her cheeks, and put on her crisply ironed blouse. She was never late, never asked for time off. Emma wasn't working for praise. She was working to reclaim herself, the part of her that had been left behind the day Tyler walked out that door. The second week began with a quiet storm. A major project hit turbulence. A demanding client called the office, furious that the construction timeline wasn't being met. The project department held an emergency meeting. No one raised their voice, but the tension in the air was heavy. Emma was reviewing the project schedule when she heard her name. A team lead, one who had never once smiled at her, spoke up. Seems there was a delay in Emma's report. The update to the construction team went out late. She froze. A breath caught in her chest. She didn't argue. Instead, she lowered her head and reopened her inbox, cross-checking timestamps and attachments. She knew she'd done everything right, but here, being right wasn't enough. You had to prove it. 30 minutes later, she sent a short email to Daniel with the subject line, Clarification, Project Delta. Attached were system logs, email screenshots, and a 3-line summary. Update was sent on the required date. Recipient failed to respond within the given window. Attached is supporting documentation. 15 minutes later, Daniel appeared at her desk, without warning. Conference room. Now, he said, voice low and clipped. Emma stood, heart pounding. Her mind ran through every possible scenario, but she stayed silent. The door closed behind them. Daniel tossed his phone on the table, crossed his arms, and stood in silence for a moment before speaking. You were right. The mistake came from the team lead. I don't like noise. You documented, you didn't blame, you didn't excuse. Emma said nothing, not because she had nothing to say, but because she was stunned. For the first time since working here, she wasn't being judged. Daniel continued, From now on, copy me on all critical updates. She nodded, unsure if it was a compliment or a form of closer supervision. But his voice didn't carry its usual edge. It sounded like quiet recognition. As they walked out of the room, Daniel slowed beside her and said unexpectedly, "You haven't eaten all morning." Emma hesitated. "I must have lost track of time. Pregnant women shouldn't skip meals. The body doesn't forgive that. Neither does the child inside you." She stopped mid-step. "You know. Liam told me, out of concern." "Not to gain favor," Daniel replied, still not looking at her directly. Emma felt both relieved and exposed. She didn't want pity, but the way he spoke, short, factual, without judgment, made it feel like something else. Not sympathy, but presence. That evening, Emma had her first proper meal in days. Sitting on her worn-out couch, one hand resting on her barely showing belly, she realized something. She wasn't as fragile as she thought, and Daniel Whitmore wasn't as distant as he seemed. After that meeting, nothing visibly changed. Daniel remained cold, concise, and perpetually unsmiling. But Emma began to notice the smallest shifts, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet enough to tell her he was paying attention. Like the cup of warm ginger tea that would sometimes appear on her desk in the morning. No note, no glance. Or the way he would pass by her desk just a beat slower, his eyes skimming her screen before giving a subtle nod, an unspoken sign of approval. No one else in the office seemed to notice, but Emma did. There was nothing romantic here. No declarations, no lingering stares, just presence, steady, quiet, and honest. And strangely, that made Emma feel safe. But just as that fragile sense of trust was beginning to take root, a piece of her past, one she thought had long been buried, came crashing back into her life like a sudden gust of wind. It started with a single call from the front desk. Emma never thought Tyler would come back. She assumed that, like most people who leave too easily, he wouldn't have the courage to face what he'd broken. But on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, while she was washing dishes, her phone buzzed. The security guard's voice crackled through the speaker. "Miss Carter, there's a Mr. Tyler Grant downstairs. Says he's your ex-husband. Claims it's urgent." Emma set the dish down, wiped her hands on a towel, and didn't respond right away. That name still made her stomach tighten. "Tell him to wait. I'll come down." She changed her shirt, tied her hair up like armor, and dabbed on a bit of lipstick. Not for beauty, but for steadiness. When the elevator doors opened, Tyler was already standing there, hands in his pockets, crisp white shirt, hair neatly styled. He gave a hesitant smile when he saw her. "Emma." "Don't call me that," she interrupted, cold and clear. "Just say what you came to say." Tyler looked unsure. He hesitated for a few seconds before exhaling. "I know you're pregnant." Emma didn't flinch. She crossed her arms. "I didn't know when I left, I swear. But when I found out, I couldn't just ignore it. I thought I should, at the very least, try to make things right." "And how would you do that? Come back? Be a father?" she asked, voice steady. "If you'd let me, I think I could be both. You and I, we could try again." Emma didn't reply. Her face remained still, but inside a quiet fury began to rise. "What do you think I am? A show you pause and play at will? You left. That has weight. You don't get to rewrite it now. I really regret what I did." "It's too late," she said plainly. A voice behind them made them both turn. "Is everything all right here?" Daniel had appeared, sleeves rolled up, holding a folder. His gaze locked onto Tyler's, not hostile, but controlled. "And you are?" Tyler asked, a little sharp. "I'm the one who stayed when you didn't," Daniel said calmly. "And I believe I still am." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "What are you to Emma?" "I don't need to define that with word," Daniel replied, eyes never leaving Emma. Emma turned to Tyler, her voice calm. "You should go. There's no room in my life for someone who gave up." Tyler didn't argue. He nodded slightly, then turned to leave, his footsteps far less certain than when he arrived. Emma remained still. Daniel stepped closer, speaking softly. "You all right?" She took a long breath. "I didn't know what I'd feel, but I felt nothing. No anger, no longing. And that's when I knew. I've moved on." Daniel nodded. "Good, because you didn't deserve to be left behind. Not when you fought this hard." Emma looked at him, There were no touches, no dramatic lines, but the way Daniel looked at her was no longer just a boss's gaze. It was the look of someone finally letting his heart speak. After that day, Emma didn't say anything more to Daniel. She didn't need to. The look they had shared in the lobby, undefinable, unspoken, was enough to tell her that whatever this feeling was, it was growing on its own terms. But that same moment made her realize something else. She couldn't walk forward with someone else if she hadn't truly come back to herself. And even though Daniel's presence had become a quiet comfort, she needed to know that her healing wasn't borrowed from someone else's steadiness. So after one very quiet night, she knew the only thing left to do was simple, but necessary, to choose herself first. Emma didn't make the decision in a rush. She didn't quit out of frustration or emotion. In fact, it came to her on an ordinary morning. She was folding a project report when she paused mid-sentence. In that quiet moment, between the clacking of keyboards and the soft hum of the office AC, she realized how long she'd been living in survival mode. Always doing well, always staying quiet, always trying not to draw too much attention, not to make mistakes, not to show too much emotion. And Daniel, he was the first person who made her feel seen, not as an employee, but as a human being trying to rise after falling. But even her feelings for Daniel, she wasn't ready to touch them yet, because most of the time, she was still learning how to reach back to herself. Emma typed her resignation letter on a drizzly evening. Typed, erased, typed again. No explanation felt right, but in the end she wrote, "I'm grateful for the opportunity to work here, but it's time I begin building my own path again." The next morning she waited until the end of the day to hand the letter to Daniel in person. He stood by his office window, one hand in his pocket, back slightly hunched, a figure both familiar and distant. She handed him the envelope. He accepted it, opened it, and read silently. No interruptions, no questions. Just silence, so long that Emma could hear the soft ticking of the clock behind him. Finally, Daniel folded the paper and set it on his desk. His eyes met hers for a brief second, not with blame, not disappointment, but understanding. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low. "This time, yes," she replied. He nodded. "Then I wish you peace. If there's anything unfinished, send it to me. I'll take care of the rest." Emma smiled, quiet but genuine. "Thank you." No hug, no promises, no pleas. She walked out of his office like stepping out of an old chapter. Not bitter, not regretful, just ready. 2 weeks later, Emma began her new job at a youth skills center. A small classroom, an old whiteboard, slightly wobbly desks, but the room buzzed with energy. Young faces, messy but eager to learn, reminded her of herself, once full of questions, unsure where to begin. She no longer wore stiff blouses or heels. Sneakers, a t-shirt, and a paper name tag suited her just fine. But each time she stood in front of her class, teaching about time management, project planning, or how to push through the feeling of not being enough, she felt herself healing, not through words, but through giving. The days that followed passed more gently than Emma expected. She taught in the afternoons, prepped her lesson plans in the mornings, and spent her evenings reading or scribbling notes for her next class. No more hurried footsteps down glass hallways, no constant ringing phones, just the scratch of pen on paper and the laughter of 16-year-olds. Daniel didn't reach out, and she didn't try to make him. What lingered between them, if anything, was a silence not filled with sorrow, but with waiting. Until one Saturday afternoon, as the early autumn wind rustled the leaves in the city park, Emma glanced up at a banner fluttering above the education fair. And in the distance, she saw a familiar figure walking toward her. Emma was sitting at a small table, folding colorful flyers about her time management and life skills for teens class, when she felt a shift in the air beside her, like someone had stepped a little too close. She looked up, and her heart skipped just once. Daniel, no suit, no briefcase, just a simple blue button-down, sleeves casually rolled, jeans, and that same quiet intensity in his eyes. "I was passing by and saw your name on the banner," he said, voice low. Emma raised an eyebrow softly. "Daniel Whitmore, casually passing by a youth education fair?" He smiled, for real, unguarded, for the first time she could remember. "All right, not so casual. Camilla," your old coworker, posted a photo. I just wanted to see if you were okay." Emma nodded. "I'm okay." And after a beat, more honestly, "Really okay." They were quiet for a moment. The fair bustled around them. Loudspeakers, kids laughing, wind catching paper flags. But between them, nothing else needed to be said. Daniel looked down at the table, then asked quietly, "Are you mad at me for not coming after you?" Emma shook her head. "No, I think if you had come sooner, I might not have been ready to receive it." Daniel exhaled, then said slowly, "I've spent my life trying to control things. When I lost my wife and child, I lost my whole world, and I couldn't stop it. Since then, I stopped trusting feelings. They didn't fit in my plans. But when you walked out of that office, I realized I was losing something important again. And this time, it was because I let it go." Emma looked at him. No pity, no blame, just quiet presence. She pulled out the chair beside her, tapped the seat gently and said, "Sit down, fold flyers with me." Daniel sat. They began folding in silence. No promises were made. No one asked, "What are we?" Just two people, once broken, learning how to walk beside each other again. And this time, there was no need to rush, only a need to move together. That night, the city lay quiet beneath a soft early rain. Emma woke at 2:17 a.m. with a deep, sharp contraction that arched through her lower back. She sat up, placing a hand on her belly, feeling the steady, urgent movements inside. It was time. She didn't panic. Everything was prepared. The hospital bag, the documents, the birth plan. She texted Camilla, her unofficial, emotional night shift friend, and called a cab to the hospital. She didn't call Daniel, not because she didn't want to, just she wasn't sure if he should be the one there yet. Across town, Daniel couldn't sleep. He stared at his phone for the 10th time. No notifications. Yet something inside him stirred, like a silent thread pulling taut. He grabbed his keys, threw on a jacket, and left the house without any real plan. Not long after, while pumping gas, his phone buzzed. A message from Camilla. "Emma's at the hospital, alone." Daniel didn't hesitate. He drove fast, heart pounding, as if racing towards something he couldn't afford to lose again. Emma was lying in the delivery room when the door opened. Daniel walked in, hair damp, eyes red, shirt wrinkled from haste. They didn't say anything, just locked eyes, and no one else was needed. Daniel took her hand. "I'm here," was all he said. She nodded, eyes brimming not with fear, but relief. For the first time, she wasn't alone. The delivery took almost an hour. The baby's first cry filled the room, small, trembling, but unmistakably alive. Time stood still. "It's a boy," the doctor smiled, gently placing the newborn in her arms. Emma held him close, fingers brushing over his soft, damp hair. Daniel leaned down and kissed the baby's forehead. "I was thinking we could name him Chris," she whispered. Daniel smiled, quiet but deeply. "Chris Carter Whitmore." Emma looked at him. No more questions needed. That name, spoken like that, was all the confirmation they needed. They weren't just two lost souls anymore. They were home, and it started with 3. The first morning Emma woke in her hospital room, sunlight filtered gently through the white curtains. Daniel sat quietly in the chair, cradling baby Chris as if the entire world fit within his arms. Every gesture, every glance, every diaper change or bottle prepared was their way of saying, "I'm here," without words. But the peace didn't last long. Just 3 days after Chris's birth, a familiar voice echoed from the doorway. "I just want to see him once," Tyler said, his voice tinged with guilt. Emma stood, slowly but steadily. "Tyler, I'm not keeping you away out of anger. I just learned something important through all of this." He frowned slightly. "Being a father isn't about showing up late and hoping flowers and a few tears can fix everything." She walked to the doorway and gently placed the bouquet on the side table. "This baby doesn't need someone who comes only when it's convenient. He needs someone who stays every single day." Daniel said nothing. He held Chris quietly. Tyler nodded, said nothing more, and turned to leave. The door closed without a sound. After that, life returned to its quiet rhythm. No announcements, no labels, no formal introductions. Daniel didn't need a title. He only needed to be part of this life, where baby cries filled the night and clumsy bottle warmings became routine. Emma didn't ask for more, just the certainty that every morning Daniel would be there, rinsing bottles, rolling the stroller out to catch the sunlight. No grand gestures, no roses, no engagement rings, just a man quietly offering his heart, and a woman brave enough to trust again, and a child, proof of a love with no name, yet never absent. Time passed quietly. Morning routines, lullabies at night, and silent glances across their small kitchen became a language only Emma and Daniel understood. No one said "I love you" or defined what they were. They just kept choosing to stay, day after day. The days turned into weeks and weeks into soft seasons. Until one afternoon, the park was unusually quiet. Autumn leaves drifted gently across the grass. A few kids played tag in the distance. Chris slept peacefully in the stroller, his face calm beneath the soft sunlight. Emma and Daniel sat side by side on a wooden bench, their hands barely touching, not intentionally, just naturally. Daniel spoke softly. "You know, I used to think I'd live my whole life just working, staying busy so I didn't have to feel anything." Emma didn't turn to him, she just smiled. "I used to think I only needed to be strong enough to never need anyone." He nodded, took a slow breath. Then from the inside pocket of his coat, Daniel pulled out a small velvet box. Nothing shiny, no fuss. Just a simple ring, like him. "I'm not asking you to marry me so I can keep you. I'm asking because I want to choose you. Every day, when you laugh, when you snap, when you're tired, and even when you're unsure you want to keep going." Emma looked at the ring, then at him. She didn't cry. Her lips just trembled slightly, like walking in light rain that doesn't make you cold. "I'll say yes," she said, "on one condition." Daniel chuckled. "Whatever it is, I'll take it. Only if you still wash dishes with me every night." He nodded, no hesitation. Easiest life contract I've ever signed. The afternoon closed with Chris's soft giggle and two pairs of eyes meeting gently, no longer needing to guess what the other felt. No grand wedding, no framed portraits, just the three of them, a simple family living by the quiet promise of choosing one another daily. And in a world full of uncertainty, the most beautiful things are often the simplest. A nod, a promise without pressure, and a hand that never lets go. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to call it forever.